think the one thing that we reject the most, that has the most amount of love in it, is pain. You know, we weren't born adults. There's a lot to let go of, and a lot of maturity to create, and a lot of immaturity to let go of. And for anybody who's really struggling with when do I grow up, it's once you put childish things away. You better be real about what's childish too, because you won't be left with much if you get rid of everything, right? Today I'm going to talk to you about one of the most important, powerful things in your life. And I think you may have noticed this, that there are three kinds of people. People that care, people that don't care, and then people that want to see the world burn. Now, for the people that care, and this is going to be for those that really want to understand themselves better and what they can contribute to the world, the one most important thing in your life is going to be investigating your traumas, not identifying with them. So the things that are the most important for us to face are the ones that we refuse to face, and I'll tell you why. Because sometimes it challenges your value. You go, oh no. Your fears, your traumas, and your insecurities. All of these things are directly related to what you're supposed to do here on planet Earth, to who you are, to what you're even good at. And somehow we refuse to face them the most. So I want to start this off by saying, you know, if you don't have a relationship with your traumas, then you really don't have a relationship with yourself. If you keep identifying with your traumas, then you never know who you are outside of them. So the whole point of this is realizing something that's going to change your life. And listen to this. If you keep running from the beliefs that were created, from the traumas that you've experienced, then you just confirm them as you create a new character of who you are that's not those things. And as you get older, you'll find the meaninglessness behind the thing that you do, the emptiness behind the relationship you're in, and the absolute void and despair that you experience on a silent level in the midst of your throne, perhaps. I realized this in my life, which is, what did my insecurities make me believe? What did my traumas make me believe? Well, my traumas were really relational traumas, meaning things that I experienced with women and with my parents, and how that affected me. And you know, here's a nice word for a trauma. Pain that you refuse to face, that has shaped who you are, that you're afraid to define you. So there's a lot of pain in the experiences that you have. So you need to be courageous in order to face it, right? But you also need a lot of faith when going back. And this is the whole thing, that most people live their life linearly and they forget the way that you set yourself free and the so-called people is by going back. It's every hero's journey and every movie we've watched that has spoken to our soul. It's not the hero has a traumatic life and his village gets burnt down by this evil dark lord of sorts who's acquainted to his family. It's like the fable stories of the video games, if you ever played them. It's really like Star Wars in a lot of ways, and all the great film that we watch nowadays that has shaped our culture. We begin realizing that it's about going back to that place, being able to face that dark representation of reality, whatever it is, and to grow up past us rejecting them, determining whether it's bad or good. The thing is that if we never get to go back and we never get to face it for what it is, we never get to see what it shaped us to become. If you guys have ever seen Samurai Jack, and I feel like that's the first thing that's coming to mind here, it's quite childish when I mention it, but this was the thing that I grew up with, and it was something that changed my life because I was able to understand that, you know, his village was destroyed by a coup, right? And he's supposed to be this demon overlord that seeks destruction. But also there's this somehow deep relationship between Jack and him because it shaped Jack to be who he is. When we have a level of immaturity and we start playing the victim in relationship to things that happen, we never get to see why we're here, and we rob the world of the divinity that it needs from you. So you almost run away from the responsibility of your life. You become a Jonah type. No matter how many times you get thrown overboard, swallowed by a fish, or spit out, you're faced with the responsibility that's required, and perhaps maybe even experiencing the pain of what happened as an adult. And so this is something that I've noticed, that if people go years and years and years without confronting their childhood traumas, those childhood traumas just show up in their children and in the future generation. If those wounds don't go addressed, then who heals them? You live with a silent expectation that others need to do, or you live with the delusion that nobody needs to talk about them, nobody needs to share them. So what's the best thing that you can do? Well, start addressing how these things have affected you without the frame of this broke me. There was a client I was working with, and it was one of the most difficult clients I worked with because of how much it felt like it defined her. And as I kept going deeper, and it's like when your father would hurt you, and when you were told these things about you, and when as you got older, people said those things as an adult, you separated yourself from the experience and you actually avoid that. And now this is the danger here. As human beings, things that you do not face go in the back end and begin to function there. So let's just say you've experienced a traumatizing childhood beyond anybody's comprehension. The real question you need to ask yourself when facing this is, does that mean anything, or am I just broken by life? And so here's a really powerful framework for you guys to understand, and I'd like to draw it out, but I could really just give you an understanding of it this way. People who refuse the idea of the divine in their life are just left with a game of pass between their ego, their personal experiences, and their traumas. So no matter how big you get that circle, no matter how much personal development you learn, no matter how much, whatever religious teachings you try to seek, it's the same conclusions. You've never actually moved past it. You've just made wider circles, arriving to the same conclusions, meaning that you haven't changed. So at what point does somebody change? Well, when they open themselves to something more than themselves. Meaning that perhaps maybe the self is not just composed of your experiences and your traumas. Perhaps that, if you looked at it this way, there's all of the universe and eternity that you're connected to, or else your life would mean nothing, and your death would be the end. A very linear life, but one that opens up themselves to the existential value, something that we understand all of reality to be connected to. Because it's something interesting. How could you connect to the stars if you don't have them within you? How could you look at the beauty around you and feel a connection with it if you didn't have that in you? How could you love if you didn't have love in yourself? And all of these questions, by the way, are really divine concepts. And I'm kind of noticing how I'm really trying to open you guys up to the necessity for divinity in your life, necessity for God, a necessity for something more than yourself. And I often notice that the people who have a foundation to receive that and see that the self is not limited by the experiences and traumas, open themselves up to aspects of themselves that are more powerful than they could ever imagine, that show up in the shadow, and also set others free from their own captivity of their ego and themselves. So in my life, I didn't want to face the insecurities that I had, the traumas that I had. What were the traumas? You'll never be loved the same way you love others. Oh, okay, well, let me run from that until it pops up in all of my relationships and burns my life down. You'll never be loved for who you are. Why? Constantly rejected for my own nature and tendency. Perhaps how did that show up? How did it manifest in my life? Have a deeper understanding of it. That's a very big thing. Especially if you want to start resolving your pain and your traumas and your behavior, understood what hurt you without you making it about you. So that's the importance of it, by the way, which I noticed that most people who reject God and are trying to find leverage and be God themselves often find themselves in a self-referencing circle with their own traumas and insecurities as it just gets bigger and bigger, as they technically become a larger narcissist, more arrogant, more self-fulfilling, and they never become resolved. It's like it defined them. It's like the trauma won. So you need an understanding of purpose, and I spoke about this in the last video, and I really think there's a lot of value there. Not only when you find peace, you find your purpose, but also when you make peace with these parts of yourself, realizing the purpose in it, the purpose comes by your door. And the connection that you guys get from purpose is one that now not only makes your relationship another head in the crowd, this is the person that you are made for, as they are made for you. And you don't need to ask questions about it. Why? Because you're not delusional and looking for delusions. You're connecting with reality. So for everybody who's experienced a trauma, maybe later or earlier in life, I noticed the most powerful thing to understand is that it has given you the gifts and it is the reason why you are here. When these things begin to reoccur, means that you need a deeper connection with this aspect of yourself that you reject. So you want to set yourself free, you want to live a life to where you are fulfilled, you want to have a loving, meaningful relationship, then you need to understand the parts of you that were traumatized so that you stop convincing yourself that you're broken. And perhaps maybe through the pain and the chaos is what sets you free. The love that you really seek, and I mean this, even in my life recently, ending something with a person I viewed as very significant, every time I looked away from the pain and the darkness it showed me about reality, I lost the love. I lost it. There's almost an overwhelming sensation that I get. And this is something for when you've truly grown up, you will say these words: thank you, God, for my sufferings and my struggles. And I mean it. I mean it. You think of a life where you die by the end of it, you're not leaving with anything. Sometimes we deny ourselves the pain, the sadness, the insecurities, the traumas, the fear, and then we have nothing to say for ourselves because we don't even know who we are. It's one of the biggest questions I get nowadays. Whoa, who am I? An identity crisis beyond an identity crisis. Traumas have been told is something that inhibits you. What if these things release you, help you find you? And it's like, you ever think about that? You're born into a body in a world that you don't understand, surrounded by people who claim to love you, and the one thing that you really want is a sense of identity. Who am I? The one thing that's most important you reject the most because you're too afraid to face it, because perhaps maybe it will confirm your deepest, darkest fears about who you are and what you're here to do and what is required from you. The trauma is the incorporation of darkness in your life that you need to integrate so that you can bring the light. It's the part of you that allows you to understand why you're here. We don't look at ourselves as defects, as rejects. You start beginning that the rejects that understand the parts of themselves that they no longer reject become a functional force in the world and an irreplaceable one and an invaluable one, meaning their value is irreplaceable. So you begin to think of life outside of your own centricity, and you stop holding on to the pain, you start feeling it. Oh my God, when your father would speak to you like that, when he'd yell at you and make you feel small, how small you would feel, how insignificant it made you. But opposed to you facing that trauma, it's just much easier to just run away from that because maybe you're still chasing significance. And so it's paradoxical. You want to escape the bubble you in, you need to come down to the core of what allows that bubble to exist. Those bubbles need to be popped. They need to be challenged. Those insecurities need to be faced. And light needs to be brought in. And that's because you're going to come in with that. I think of my life, and I think the only way to really describe it is through my own personal experiences. I wasn't aware of my own traumas. What did that make me? Prone to searching for it again, to then paste it on the girl that hurt me. You know, these things pop up in childhood, and then they show up in the girl that you're with because of your unaddressed mother wounds or daddy wounds, and they have affected you. A lot of the time we're afraid of going back there because we don't want to hate the people we love. Remember, they never wanted to hurt you. You're just becoming familiar with reality and how you can hurt others. So perhaps if you want your love to matter, begin to care more about yourself and understand what that means. To care about others is to go out of your way to integrate the parts of yourself that can hurt others. That's somebody that really loves. Somebody that looks to control, to learn about their nature, that looks to understand how these traumas have shaped them. And some of the deepest love that you can ever get is actually on the other side of you embracing the traumas that you have, and you could heal them. Now, of course, there's no such thing as completely eradicating it, because then I just erase you as a person. So the most important belief that you can have is these shape me, not define me. They guide me, not control me. And a lot of the time we feel like we're controlled by it, but perhaps maybe that's what you should investigate. Maybe you should consider that this aspect of you has affected you for the greater good. So there's a level of faith in going back. And I notice that when I work with most people nowadays, it's like they go back and they face the same conclusion that they were afraid of facing. So they go on a 3-day journey, a submarine trip down to the Marina Trench to realize, yep, Dad was right, worthless. This is the hardest homework I'm going to give you. What if I told you to sit with it before you rejected it? What if I told you to investigate maybe the lining of the floor that says I'm worthless and to see if there's something underneath it? I think what sets most people free is when they're able to realize that they can be loved for that. Not because it's an expectation, but because they've showed up their whole life to make sense of the things that have happened to them, that they now embrace them, live with them. And that is the action of love. To listen, to embrace it, and to live with it. That's loving. That love sets you free from the trauma that you've experienced. Every story that we know of a man of great achievement and a person that has overcome has faced these parts of themselves, has developed a relationship with them. And maybe that's what we're afraid of doing. If I don't see it, it's not there. Well, we're going to flip it on its ass. If I face it, I embrace it, and I bring it into all aspects of myself that show it's there, I set myself free from it. So the parts of you that perhaps that you reject, that you keep in those traumas about how the world is, maybe this is the beginning of an adventure by which you investigate your gifts and why you're here through your traumas. Let's lead with it, with an open end, to something so much more that you're connected to. And it will no longer be what defines you. It'll bring the fruit and the fullness to your life.